Hey, this is Jon Sherman. I am the author of The Four Foundations of Golf. And a couple of years ago, the indoor golf shop team helped build the simulator of my dreams in my house. So I'm going to give you a quick tour and show you how it all came together. Let's go. So we built my house almost a decade ago, just over that. And when we built the house, we had this extra room over the garage. Originally, it was unfinished. But as I had my first child and our second child, we turned this into a playroom. So it was carpeted, there was toys everywhere, and you can't see it now. I'll show some pictures, but in this corner, I had set up a net and had my turf over here. I used to have a SkyTrack launch monitor and a TV back there. So I would share the space as a playroom for my kids and hitting room for dad. But as time went on, as they got much older, they're 9 and 11 now, they stopped using this room as much and they started moving to other rooms in the house. So I started to have higher aspirations of turning this into a real simulator. And my wife, she is wonderful, I love her very much, was open to it. And that's when I first got in touch with James Laidlaw from In-Home Golf, as well as Mike Robinson. So the first thing we had to do was I obviously measured the room and I sent a very rough diagram to James so we could start brainstorming what this space was going to look like. What was the size of the screen, how much turf we were going to use, the technology considerations, what type of projector we were going to use. Is it short throw? Is it long throw? The launch monitor, the computer. So there's all these things that you have to take into account when you're doing a custom build. And to be honest, I'm the least handy person in the world, so the thought of me doing this by myself was not an option. So the first thing that James did is that he made an awesome 3D rendering based on the drawings I did, just so we can get a rough idea of how much turf we would use in the room, again, the size of the screen, where the projector is going to go, and more importantly, there's some other usable space in this area. So in terms of the dimensions of the room, it's about 19 feet deep, which is quite large, but it's only 14 feet wide from this area to this area. Over here, you can't see it right now, but there's like a little inlet, but that's not really usable space for the simulator. So that did affect some of the decisions we made. 14 feet isn't tremendously wide, so I had to be prepared to be a little bit more offset in this direction to hit balls because I don't want to hit this wall over here. And it also had some issues with the type of projector we were going to select. After we built it, we did add our washer and dryer. We wanted it on the upstairs level. So this was another design consideration for James, was that we needed to make sure that this was accessible. And obviously we built a nice curtain here, which allows us to use the washer and dryer. Anyone with kids knows that it feels like we're running this thing all day. So that was actually really important for us. All right, so let's first get into the technology considerations. I'm not a big fan of radar indoors if I don't have to use it. So my initial desire was to get a camera-based launch monitor, and James and I went back and forth a couple of times on this. So one option was to do a ceiling-mounted solution. Unicore is one of the more popular solutions, and there's also TrackMan IO. But I wanted to get a camera-based launch monitor that was portable, just in case I wanted to use it anywhere else. So I did go with the Foresight GC3. I felt that was the best blend of features I was looking for and the price level I was comfortable with. So that decision also affected what type of projector we were going to use and where we put it. Because if you do go with a Unicore ceiling mounted projector, you would need to move it further back, and that would make the decision different between a short throw and long throw projector. So once we decided we were going with the Foresight, we knew that the dimensions of the screen was going to dictate the type of projector we were going to use. So I don't have enough width here to get full 4K. The aspect ratio we were going to use was 4:3. So that led us to using the BenQ HD projector. And the image quality, although it's not 4K, it's awesome. So that was also in the design where we were going to put the projector exactly. So that was planned beforehand. So likely the next most important thing when you're doing a custom install is obviously your impact screen. Now the indoor golf shop has a lot of pre-made sizes, but they also also do custom design, we had to get the sizing done perfectly. So after I had sent James and his team my initial measurements, I chose to invest in a better screen up front so that wouldn't rip and I wouldn't have to replace it over time. So another thing that's really important is bounce back. I don't want to be hitting a driver here. I have about 160 mile per hour ball speed. It's not Bryson distance, but it's pretty fast. And I don't want a ball bouncing back at me. So you can't see this, but when they built it, there is the main premium impact screen is the first layer, but there's another screen behind it. So what that does is it absorbs the golf ball nicely and kind of bounces back to me in my hitting area. So that's been really nice. Another thing that is really important with impact screens, especially if you're in a contained room like this where I'm shutting the door, is noise. Hitting drivers is really loud, obviously, and if you have a screen that's equally as loud, you can actually damage your ears over time. So the noise reduction is awesome. It doesn't make a loud thwacking noise at impact, so it's not bothering my children or wife when I'm hitting balls up here. And last but not least is image quality. So if you're buying a budget impact screen, you're not going to get as crisp of an image from HD. So when you're playing simulated courses, you're watching a movie or TV, it's just not going to look as nice. So I invested in a nice projector and I wanted the screen to look nice too. So those four things are kind of what set their impact screens apart. Again, not loud, it absorbs impact nicely, incredibly durable. I'm not sure I'll ever have to replace this thing, and a crisp image. So now I'll talk about kind of the framing and how this came to life as James and Mike built this. So it was a combination of sending materials beforehand. The screen and the turf arrived to my house, and then James and Mike also arrived with some materials of their own. But they had this kind of incredible process that they went through to frame things out. I'll give some different angles of this, but the top frame has a nice clean look where it's nice and black. It transitions from the ceiling to the simulator really nicely. Luckily, I haven't had to test that. It's also built in for protection so you don't damage your ceiling. I haven't hit any sky dries in here. Hopefully, if I have a guest over, they won't do it either. But in case it does, it has nice protection up there so the ball will gently fall back, and it gives it that really nice black, clean look. Another thing we did was they needed to make sure they had the dimensions, these wall guards here, which the indoor golf shop does sell. So these were adhered very nicely to the wall. I will admit I have hit the occasional shank in here over the years. So if you do hit a hosel rocket over there, it's going to absorb that. But more importantly, it just gives that like super clean professional look. And as you can see, they also have a nice frame around it, so it looks nice and contained. Behind it, there's a ton of bungee cords. There's actually a window back there that we had to cover. We had to put a blackout screen on that to make sure light wasn't getting through. So again, they showed up and took care of everything for me. The plan was done and they executed. This thing was built in under a day. It was pretty incredible how quickly they moved. So another important consideration in the design process, and obviously when they built out this room, is turf. When you're building a simulator in your house, you're likely going into a room that already has carpet. Perhaps there's nothing there. So in this room, we had a pre-existing carpet, and the conversation with my wife was, do we want to have some of the carpet left, or do we want all turf? She wanted as little as turf as possible, which I understood. Also, turf is expensive, so that is also a consideration. So in the design process, we kind of went back and forth over what areas would be turf and where we would keep carpet. And we kind of settled in on, I would say about 70-ish% of the room is turf. So what we had to do when they got here is that they not only removed the carpet, but they removed the subflooring, and they replaced it with another subflooring that made the turf kind of flush to the carpet. That was something I was a little concerned about, but over time, the turf blended nicely into the carpet, so there's a smooth transition. You can't see it behind you. I'll give you some other angles, but there's chairs back there for people to sit. So there is a little bit of carpet left in this room. And another thing I wanted to do was be able to practice my putting. James was able to install 2 cups. They're about, I think, 8 or 9 feet apart. so I can practice my putting in both directions. What's also super cool and important to me when I'm practicing my putting is that it feels like a real hole. There was enough distance below it where they can create a real cup. So I'm able to do my putting practice here, and obviously my hitting area over here as well. Also, another consideration on the technology front is gaming computers and how you want to use it. So on my prior SkyTrack setup, I did have a gaming computer, so we were able to use that. I do have a touch screen over here that sometimes I use with the simulator, or I can use the mouse and keyboard. I kind of go back and forth between the two, but that was something they brought in, was the touch screen, so that I could easily move over there and change my target, club selection, wherever golf courses I'm playing. I use the GS Pro software with my Foresight GC3, which is awesome, and I love it. So I think a lot of golfers often wonder what you get with the DIY method or custom built. And it's honestly less headaches, better builds, better materials. There's just a ton of small details that I would never know about. James is an absolute expert. He's been in the industry for well over a decade and done a ton of simulator builds. So there's just a lot of small touches here, like the turf is a bit curved, so when the ball hits the screen, it's rolling back to me. Just the way the turf transitions to the carpet and how clean this all looks together. I know that if I did this myself or tried to install this projector up here through the attic with all the electricity, I would probably kill myself and break everything. So it was nice to go back and forth with him before the project even started, so that when he and Mike arrived, they got straight to work and made this thing happen, so that they came one morning and by the following night, I was completely set up and hitting balls in here, and it was like a dream come true. Now, another thing that is super cool about having this big screen in the house is that it's also an entertainment room. So I was so impressed with the picture that I added a bit of an audio element to this as well, so I could watch sports with my son or movies together. So my daughter has had her friends over to watch movies here. My son has had friends over to watch sporting events. And it's really been a nice addition to the house for all of us to spend some time in here as a family. Unfortunately, I'm still the only golfer in the family. I hope that changes over the years, but I am the only one hitting balls in here most of the time. I live in New York. We have longer winters, so this is kind of a place where I come to keep my game sharp, practice, and it's also a great studio for me to shoot videos for my YouTube channel. So I would just rate this whole thing an A+ overall. And if you need help designing your system or getting quotes and the technology you're going to use, you can reach out to the Indoor Golf Shop. They have a separate page for their custom installation, and they're happy to answer your questions. And their team is even bigger now, and they're just unbelievable. So huge thanks to them, and I hope you learned something about how this whole process works.